I'm Rob Nickerson. I'm one of the members of the steering committee of the Northern California chapter. And we are the sponsors of this presentation, Camino Inglés, three ways. We'll hear what the Camino Inglés is in a few minutes, so some details about it. And we're going to hear from three experienced pilgrims about how they walk the Camino. And any Camino can be handled in a number of different ways. There's not one way to travel on a Camino. And so you're going to see three different ways in this presentation. And it may give you some ideas about how you want to walk the Camino or travel the Camino in the future, whether it's the Inglés or whether it's one of the other routes. Perhaps you've already done the Francis or the Portuguese, and you want to pick off one of the other ones in the future. So we have three very experienced pilgrims here who are going to be talking. Emilio Escudero, he walked in September 2019, the Inglés, but he's done many other pilgrimages. Laurie Ferris, who's done, I don't even know what the number is for you guys, but it's a lot. And then Rob Nickerson, that's me with my wife Betsy. We've walked over 1,000 kilometers on the Camino, on different Caminos, the Francis and the Portuguese, and then we added to that the Inglés. So we're going to cover three different ways that we did it because we all took a slightly different approach to this. And so I'm going to start off with Emilio here, and Emilio is going to tell you about the Camino Inglés and then talk about how he handled it. So Emilio, it's up to you.
All right.
Let me stop my screen share.
All right.
There you go.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Rob. I'd like to begin my part of the presentation on the Camino Inglés on a personal note. And that is that I have a deep connection with Galicia. And that's because my grandfather was born there. My grandfather's name was Emilio Pérez Portela, and he was born in La Guardia in Pontevedra. La Guardia is called Agarda in Gallego. And Agarda is a small fishing village, only about 10,000 people. And it has a very long and interesting history. The Celts moved there about 800 BC and built large settlements along the side of the mountain that overlooks the town. If you're walking the Camino Portugués coastal route, you actually walk right through Agarda. And if you're walking the Portuguese central route, when you cross the Minho from Valença to Tui, you're a short bus ride away. So anyway, here's something interesting. When you know some things about a place before you visit it, you can make your experience truly richer. And for this reason, Laurie, Rob, and I decided that it would be a good idea to give you some background on Galicia and the Camino Inglés before we actually start talking about our own experiences. Now, in case you might want to know a little bit more about Galicia than we're going to be able to cover during this presentation, I would like to, at the end of my presentation, show you a slide that has a number of references on it that you might want to record for later exploring. And what I'll do is, at the end of my presentation, I'll show you this slide. And if you have your camera handy, you can take a picture of it so you make a record of these various topics. So when we get to this, I will show you. If you've not walked the Camino Inglés yet, we hope our presentations will make your experience more complete and deep and satisfying. And if, as I think many of you have already walked the Camino Inglés, we hope that our presentations will evoke many warm and pleasant memories. Let me share something here. All right. I think that should show. All right. These are the bold colors are the autonomous regions of Spain, and each autonomous region is divided usually into one or more provinces. There are 50 provinces in all of Spain, and if you look here, this is Galicia. Galicia has 4 provinces: Pontevedra, Coruña, Lugo, and Ourense. And each province has a capital by the same name. This is what the terrain in Galicia looks like. And take a good look, because there are no flat areas in all of Galicia, unlike what you might find here on the east in León and farther east. The light green means hills, and the darker green means bigger hills and mountains. The eastern boundary of Galicia starts over here around Ribadeo and crosses the Cordillera Cantábrica south to somewhere around here, around where Ocebreiro is, the east of Ocebreiro, all the way down to the Portuguese border, and then west along here to the Atlantic Ocean. Portugal is, of course, along the south, and on this area, this is León, and of course, Asturias and the Cordillera Cantábrica. Galicia has a stunning coastline, and this area here is ominously called Costa da Morte, and the coast of death. And that's because of the many shipwrecks and the lives that have been lost in these very rough waters. The north is the Mar Cantábrico. In English, we call it the Bay of Biscay. Let's take a quick look at the 6 caminos that traverse Galicia. First of all, there's the Camino Francés that comes from the east through Sarria and then into Santiago. The Camino Primitivo originates around Oviedo through Lugo, and then into Santiago into the Camino Francés around Pelide. The Camino del Norte comes down from Ribadeo through the Cordillera Cantábrica and then into the Francés around Arzúa. And then there's the little known Camino San Andrés that starts just north of Zamora and goes through Ourense and then directly into Santiago, as does the Camino Portugués from Lisbon and Porto, directly north. And this is the Camino Ingles. The 2 routes from Ferrol and from A Coruña. And note that it's the only Camino that actually begins and ends in Galicia. Just a little bit more background about Galicia. The language. Falas Galego. The language in Galicia is Galego, and it's one of the 5 recognized languages in Spain: Castellano, Español, Catalan, Euskara, Basque, Galego, and then Valenciano. Those are the 5 languages. Galegos are ethnic wise, there are a number of things, but Celts, um, dating back to the 8th century BC, but they're also derived from other ethnic groups. The Romans, for example, in the 1st century BC, and then in the 4th century, 5th century, I think, yeah, 5th century, it was the Alans, the Suebi, the Vandals, and then in the 5th century, no, 6th century, it was the Visigoths, and then finally in the 8th century, the Berbers and the Arabs, with the invasion of Islam into Spain. The economy of Galicia is primarily centered around tourism, but it has a strong manufacturing sector. It it builds automobiles and builds ocean-going ships. The fishing, agriculture, and dairy production sectors are also quite healthy. Immigration. This is really interesting. Because Galicia is a land of immigrants. In the late 19th century and early 20th century, Galicia's economy was in dire straits, and many people don't know this, but in the mid to late 1800s, all of Europe, especially northern Spain, was suffering from incredibly cold, epically cold winters. This is toward what we call now the Little Ice Age. And snows were so heavy that they lasted into early summer. Agriculture and industry were devastated, and there in fact was famine in northern Spain. And because of these hard times, many Gallegos emigrated to South America and to the Caribbean. And that's where that personal note I made earlier comes into play again, because my grandfather, Emilio Perez Portela, was one of those immigrants. He emigrated to Puerto Rico in 1895 when he was 17 years old. And that's a bit of history. The Camino Inglés. Laurie and Rob will talk to you about how they walk the Camino Inglés. And I'll talk to you about how I walk the Camino Inglés, which is staying primarily in albergues. Here's some basics about the Camino Inglés now. It's a short Camino. It's sort of like the Camino from Sarria on the Camino Francés and the Camino from Tui on the Portuguese. Distance-wise, one other thing, I guess, distance-wise, if you start from from Ferrol, the 120 kilometers is sufficient to warrant a Compostela. But if you walk from Coruña to Santiago, those are only 80 kilometers. So that does not qualify for a Compostela, except that there is a workaround, which if you're interested, I can talk about later on. The Camino Inglés is really short, and some people can walk it in 4 or 5 days. I would not recommend doing that. The towns along the Camino Inglés are not as well known as those towns on the Camino Francés, and that's for a couple of reasons. Obviously, there were fewer pilgrims that walked the Camino Inglés over the centuries, but also most notably is that the towns on the Camino Francés developed under very different political and economic circumstances. Most notably that those towns had to fortify and defend themselves against the spread of Islam in the 8th century. And the towns on the Camino Ingles did not have to do that. In 2019, the Camino Inglés had the 4th greatest number of Compostelas issued after the Francés, the Portuguese, and the Camino del Norte. All right, so this is what the Camino Inglés looks like. The route from Ferrol and the route from A Coruña. These two routes meet in Mesón do Vento. From Coruña, it's just about a day and a half walk. From Ferrol, I did it with other pilgrims in 4.5 days. And then from Mesón do Vento to Santiago, it was another 2.5 days. Here are some basics about my Camino. I walked both routes, a little under 160 kilometers. I walked for 9 days. I also took 5 Turigrino days. So I was a tourist also. I spent 3 nights in A Coruña and 2 in Ferrol. I stayed in 7 albergues, municipal, junta, and private albergues. I stayed in 3 hotels, one in A Coruña, and then the 2 paradores, one in Ferrol and the other in Santiago. And to get to A Coruña, where I started my Camino Inglés, I took a plane, a ride on Iberia from Madrid to Santiago, and from Santiago, a train, a Renfe, to A Coruña. That was really quick, but very, very fast way. This is the map. This is a map of A Coruña. It's a delightful city, about 250,000 people. The center of the city is really compact and easy to walk, and I recommend it highly, and I left wanting to spend 1 more day there. My hotel was down around here, and this is a delightful walk along the port to the Plaza Maria Pita, one of the main plazas in all of A Coruña. This is the old town, the Casco Antiguo. And on this part of it is the Iglesias de Santiago, where I got my credencial. Let's see, the port is on this side, and then on the other side of this residential, commercial, very modern area are the beaches. The beaches around here on this area. And then way over here is the Torre De Arcules, the Tower of Hercules. I'll show you a picture of that in a moment. Because of the huge number of immigrants that left from A Coruña to the New World, A Coruña considers itself a window to the west. And here above my right shoulder is the Torre De Arcules. This was a cloudy day. The first day I was in A Coruña. The next day was sunny. This is the Torre De Arcules. It was built in the 2nd century by Romans and is the longest, or I should say the longest operating lighthouse today. The compass here points to the west, toward us. This is the lovely Romanesque Church of Santiago, and where I got for €2 my credencial. But this is also where the Camino Inglés actually officially begins. This was my lunch that first day. Uh, two small bocadillos de calamares, absolutely delicious. And on this side, a rosquilla for with my coffee. It's my opinion, and you may agree or not, but I think the bread in Galicia is the absolute best in all of Spain. These are called galerías. You'll see these typical windowed facades all over the north of Spain, especially, well, Galicia, Asturias, and Cantabria. It's just a part of the local architecture that causes the wind and the cold in the winter. This is the Plaza Maria Pita. It's one of the main plazas in Santiago, and this is the Ayuntamiento, the city hall. And this is Maria Pita. It's kind of interesting because she's the brave woman who, when Drake attacked A Coruña and her husband was killed in this battle, she took up a sword and she led a counterattack that beat back Drake and his pirates. And you need to remember that although the Brits consider Sir Francis Drake a hero, and obviously he did many wonderful things, in Spain, he's actually considered a scoundrel and a pirate. This is the beach, kind of a touristy area. This is a touristy, kind of modern residential area of the city. It was cloudy that day. This is my first day there, but very nice. All right, let's actually start walking. And the first part of my walk was from Coruña to Mesón do Vento. Let me get this little thing out of the way here. The first stage or the first day is really from A Coruña to Hercules, and then from just 22 kilometers, some of it along the Ria here on the northern part, and then from Hercules, just a half a day walking, but it's all uphill at this point. In Hercules, the albergue is modern. It's a very, very nice albergue. And one of the nice things about it is that it's just up the road from a very nice, very small bar that makes incredibly wonderful home cooked meals for pilgrims. And this is where I met Bettina and Janice from England and Scotland, and we had dinner together that evening. Now, if you can see it, I don't know if you noticed. Do you see anything that three of us have in common, other than our smiles? If you look down at our feet, we're all wearing Birkenstocks, which I thought was surprising. The next day from Hercules to Mesón do Vento was really very pleasant, and it was all pretty much uphill. When I got to Mesón do Vento, my original plan was to take a bus from here to Ferrol and then start my Camino again down from Ferrol. But it happened to be a Sunday, and the buses don't run, at least in this area, on Sundays. So I talked to a couple cab drivers. I negotiated with one of them for him to take me to Ferrol, the 80 kilometers for €50. And that was a lot, much more than I expected to pay. But I also looked down because this cab driver gave me a wonderful personal tour of the countryside and every one of the little towns all the way up to Ferrol. In Ferrol, these are the first 2 days from Ferrol to all along the flat area here along the Ria to Polo, or actually the albergue in Neda. And then from Neda, kind of a flat area here, and then it goes up a little bit, gets hilly around here, and then there's a descent to the bridge, which crosses the Eume River into Ponte Du Monde. 2 days there. This is Ferrol. Ferrol is a small capital city, provincial capital, about 70,000 people. Has a small commercial port. There was a fiesta going on that day, and I stayed there 2 nights. 2 nights in the very reasonably priced Parador. Ferrol is still a strong shipbuilding place. It has a strong industry. And it also has, among many things, a really amazing naval museum in which I really learned a lot of things, especially about the Great Armada, the Gran Armada of 1588 that sailed from Ferrol toward England and the Netherlands and never really got to attack England. At a local bar, I was reminded that sidra is big in Galicia, like it is in Asturias. And pouring sidra is called escanciando sidra. So that's the Spanish term for pouring cider. That first day, walking from Ferrol up the Ria, I crossed the river here, Xuvia River, and it's just it's very near where the albergue is on a very pleasant, quiet, linear park right on the Ria. This was my dinner that first night in Neda. Actually, I had it with Tobias. I remember. It was bread and wine, a nice little salad, and these are zamburinas. Zamburinas are not scallops. They're related to the scallop. Scallops are called vietas, and they're a little bit more expensive. This is leaving Neda, looking back toward the Ria. And as often happens when one walks the Camino, you meet amazing people, and I did. I met some amazing people. I remember Yasmin, Tobias, Michele, and Marti. And I think at least 2 of my fellow walkers are actually on this talk. I saw Michele and Yasmin and hello to you. We formed a cohort and pretty much walked all the way into Santiago together. And I remember them all fondly, and we're still in touch. Here we're crossing the bridge into Ponte Du Monde. The city is built on the hillside and overlooks the Ria and the river Eume. And the name of the town is Ponte de Eume, but it's pronounced Ponte Du Monde, Ponte Du Monde. Here we're cooling our feet before dinner. A little time for little tourist attractions. And that evening was the last day of the Festa das Peras, the feast celebrating pears in Ponte Du Monde. From Ponte Du Monde, there are 2 days, one to Betanzos and the other to Precedo. The first day, 21 kilometers. Some of it is along the Ria, very, very nice. And the next day from Betanzos to Precedo is just a short day. It was a short day for us. Both days quite pleasant walking. This is leaving Ponte Du Monde in the morning. Pretty city. And this is walking south with the Ria on my right shoulder for many kilometers. And this, we took a little time to go down to the Ria to look at the shore, and there's a very nice beach nearby. Finally, we arrived in Betanzos. This is the old town, the clock tower in the old town. And like Ferrol, Betanzos must have gone through a period in its development where incorporated a lot of art, art nouveau. And there's some really, really beautiful pieces in both these towns. And this is before dinner. I had to show this picture. Stephen met us by then. This is Marty and Yasmin, Michelle, and Tobias, and of course myself. Good group. This was our longest day walking from Precedo all the way to Pueblo, to the albergue in Pueblo. And this first part was, a little hilly, and then this was a long uphill into Hospital de Bruma, or I should say, Mesón do Vento. And this is where the Camino from Coruña comes in and meets the one from Ferrol. A lot of pilgrims will stay here in Hospital de Bruma, but we decided to go to the new albergue that had been opened in Pueblo. It's a two-story farmhouse that was reconverted, and it's all modern and very nice, spacious, and in the room I slept, there were only single beds. There were no bunks at all. Very nice. Then from Pueblo, there was another 2 days into Santiago. 16 kilometers into Sigüero, and then the other 17 kilometers, some of it city walking into Santiago. Both days actually quite pleasant. This is leaving Pueblo in the morning. Great mornings and great landscapes that we saw. And I don't know, if you walk the Camino, you probably realize that toward the end of your Camino, this was our next to last day, we started walking a little bit more slowly and stopping a little bit more frequently. And we took time to rest and to talk and just reminisce a little bit. I think it often happens on the Camino. We celebrated too. This was in Sigüero. Yasmin, we celebrated her birthday in Sigüero. And after dinner, we continued celebrating with little shots of orujo. Orujo is that 100 proof liquor that's popular in Galicia and Asturias. And next day, walking into Santiago around Formaris, and maybe Rob will mention something about this, but there's what's called an Enchanted Forest. It's actually quite delightful. Pretty area. Marty and Tobias took some time to feed this burro on with some of their leftover apples. And then just before arriving into Santiago, we were reminded that Marjorie Kemp, it says here, passed through here 600 years ago, the same Camino we were walking. And she was the only recorded female pilgrim of the 15th century. So the tradition continued. And finally, we arrived in Santiago, and to our delight, someone had cleaned the facade of the cathedral just for us. Great view. And this was our goodbye. We decided to meet in the Parador, where my wife Tanya and I were staying, and where we were joined by my friend Charlie. And because from then on we were going to be walking into or driving into Portugal. But this was our goodbye with Tobias and Yasmin and Marti. And a visit to the saint is a must here. To give him thanks for the Camino de Santiago and for the opportunity to share so many wonderful experiences with fellow pilgrims. And finally, of course, a hug for the saint for a safe Camino and a safe trip home. Now, this is the slide I had mentioned before. If anyone is interested, I'll walk through this. And at the end, if you have your camera, just take a picture of these topics that I've pointed out, and you can look at them up later on. Of course, the Costa de Morte, really interesting part of the city, a devastating oil spill that everyone should know about. The archaeology of Galicia, the topography, the Rias in Galicia, the Celtic culture and music of Galicia, gaitas, Alvarinho, the wonderful white wine, that, and the queimadas and orujo in Galicia, and of course the seafood, fish and shellfish food, just delicious, best. Caldo gallego, one of my favorites. Pimientos de Padrón, one of my favorite tapas also. Rosalia de Castro, who's this is a reference to the literature and poetry of Galicia. Maria Pita, of course, the heroine of A Coruña, and Sir Francis Drake. Some of the really interesting history, around this time. And then finally, around Ferrol, you'll probably hear about this person, San Andrés de Tejido. It's a good thing to look that person up and see what he's about. So let's just count down 5, 4, take your pick if you want, 3, 2, 1, in. Thank you very much. This is the end of my part of the presentation.